Good afternoon. Welcome to this panel on cell and gene therapies, advanced therapies. My name is Alain Vertès. I am Managing Director of Nexa Biotechnologies, a boutique consulting firm based in Basel, in Switzerland. And what Nexa does is entrepreneurship, in and out licensing, and of course, strategic consulting with a focus on advanced therapies. We have a very exciting panel today for this next 45 minutes, and we are going to survey essentially the field from the basic science to investment trends and discussing also how we are going to develop and commercialize those TMPs and how the market is responding. We have a very exciting panel of distinguished professionals in this field. And we have, I would say, all the competencies to address these questions. The first slide I wanted to show are extracted from two books that I published over the years. And that was part of the idea of surveying cell and gene therapy. The first one on the left was very much the first generation of cell and gene, very much focused on minimally manipulated cells like MSCs for inflammation. And we have already entered into the next wave of innovation, the next S-curve in innovation, which is discussed in this second book, second generation cell and gene-based therapies, where essentially the field and the regulators and the patients are ready for engineered cells. So it's a brand, it's a huge lab in between the two S-curves, and it's extremely exciting to be at this time in history and participate actively in this field. So I just would like to introduce, to let the panelists introduce themselves, and first starting with my co-chair.
Thank you very much, Alan. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm really happy because we have panelists covering any set of the relevant submodalities. We will go into the detail of that, but let me just introduce myself and provide you as a matter of introduction also some element around Lonza. As you may know, Lonza is a conglomerate, extremely active in the field of life science. And you could consider us as the outlet for everything that is relevant to CMC technical development. The company is in the nearbys of a 4 billion size, and we have 11,000 employees. And this is maybe the interesting part, because with the 37 sites and 11,000 of employees, which the great majority is all focused on technical operation, we could consider ourselves one of the largest network of operation in pharmaceutical manufacturing. As you can see, we also try to have a significant focus in R&D with meaningful investment and several sites dedicated to innovation. We cover all the modalities from mammalian, biologics, recombinant protein, but also we do chemicals and drug product, so with sterile filling. But particularly for the relevance of the discussion of today, I'm here to represent the cell and gene technologies part of Lonza. Beside the CDMO services, also I want to bring to evidence that we are also doing quite a meaningful work in terms of products to service the bioscience. So we do media, we do capsules, and we do several ingredients and or material, also specifically for cell and gene technologies like nucleofactions or other transfection technologies. If we go more into the specifics of cell and gene technologies, I would like to fundamentally give you the idea that Lonza is able to cover all the aspects of cell and gene. We are doing autologous and allogenic. We are focusing on 3D bioreactor. We are probably among the pioneers and most advanced developer in the iPSC technology, around which we also serve the first bank to NIH. We definitely also are looking forward toward particularly innovative things like exosome, where we have an active R&D search. And we are providing services that are very important to support the activity around cell and gene technologies, like tissue acquisition, media buffer, and viral vector production in terms of cell lines. So all in all, we are also developing external partnership like partnership with Vineti or Cryoport that helps to have a real vein-to-vein network, and all the supporting elements like plasmid and ex vivo modification like the nuclear factor services. And then, as you might have recently heard, we also took into the first patient the Cocoon device that is intended for a fully automated delivery of autologous therapy. But now let me just get toward the most relevant part of the conversation of today, that is the introduction of our colleagues. And so let me introduce them one by one. So we have Miguel Forte, who is the CEO of Bone Therapeutics. It's involved in ARM and the ISCT, and is committed definitely to the value that CGT can bring to patients. Miguel, why don't you introduce yourself?
Thank you, Alberto and Alain. Very briefly, I'm an MD PhD by training. I've been involved in clinical, regulatory, and pharmaceutical activity for a long time, passionate about cell and gene therapy, and currently CEO of an MSc-based cell therapy company that I'll present briefly in a minute. And very happy to be here to discuss about the challenge, the opportunities, and the future of a field we're all very committed to.
Thank you very much, Miguel. I would like also to introduce Regina and then ask her to present herself. Regina is the managing partner at Wellington Partners, one of the leading German-based EU healthcare VCs. She has invested in early stage and growth companies for 2 decades. Wellington has been close to cell-based therapies with the investment in Immatics, and Regina is representing the funds on the board of Carisma, the leading macrophage activation and cell therapy company. I would like Regina maybe to introduce yourself a little bit more in detail.
Thank you very much. There's not much more left to introduce here, really. So I'm the investor on the panel, so I'm there for platitudes and things that don't go into much detail. So the only thing I can really deal with is kind of, is there actually a great story that we can sell to a public market or to a pharma company here? And since we've voted with our feet, we do absolutely believe there is. So maybe just a little bit more background. Wellington Partners, we have the pleasure to be confused with the Boston-based Wellingtons quite often. So a number of public company CEOs come and ask me whether we are the largest shareholders. We are not. We are a Munich-based, European-focused venture fund. We have been doing life science investments for the better part of 2 decades, initially out of tech funds. So our tech partners were famous for investments like Spotify. And but for the last 12 years, we have independently managed life science funds. And now going forward, Wellington Partners in Munich is a purely life science focused fund. And what we pride ourselves is that we try to invest in things that really change medical practice. So we don't care whether it's a therapeutic, diagnostic, a device, or even a digital tool that really helps to make the lives of patients, doctors, and better, but within the frame of a reasonably financed healthcare system. And so far, we've been doing this quite well. We are at our 5th fund, the 3rd dedicated life science fund, and have over 400 million of money committed to different investments at different stages. And we like things that have a strong scientific foundation. And this is also what brought us really to cell therapy, is that, I mean, in the end, those immune cells that we're talking about, or those cells that maybe we'll hear about from bone, they have a function in the body. They do something. They are designed to do something. And what we actually do is we make them do something better. And this is something I, as an investor, can see as a very simple story. If the function is known what I go after, and I'm simply just adding functionality to that, then I only have to see that I'm not getting into a safety problem or into a manufacturing problem. And I guess we'll discuss all of those. And my feeling is that we will have to come to a universe where cell therapy is affordable, is safe, and also is delivered on a time scale that is actually relevant for the patients in the healthcare system. And it of course goes without saying that Carisma, and Steve will talk about that, fulfills all of those requirements.
Thank you much, Regina. Super appreciated your introduction. I would then like to move to Stephen Kelly, President and CEO of Carisma Therapeutic, which is a company engaged in the development of engineered macrophage for solid tumor indication. Stephen, why don't you introduce a little bit yourself?
Thanks, Alberto. Thanks, Alain, for inviting us to participate. I'm Steve Kelly, President and CEO of Carisma. I've been with the company since early 2018, with a 30-year career in biotech and pharma, commercial roles in the early part of my career, and then startup work for the last 15 years or so. Carisma is a 40-year-old company. It was spun out of Penn. It's focused on engineered macrophages. The idea was, while CAR-T was working very well in heme malignancy at Penn, where people were looking at it, it was really challenged in solid tumors for a variety of reasons that ranged from tumor access to immunosuppressive tumor microenvironment and antigen heterogeneity. And the thought was, could we engineer macrophages to overcome those? And after a year of looking for a different vector, they were able to identify a vector that could reproducibly transduce macrophages, and that was the catalyst to form the company. Since that time, over the last 4 years, we've done quite a bit. We've been developing a pipeline of solid tumor targeted CAR macrophages. The first one targets HER2. We've just received IND clearance from the FDA, and we'll be moving into phase 1 clinical testing in the fourth quarter. We have 2 other programs, one targeting PSMA, one targeting mesothelin. We'll nominate development candidates for those by the end of this year. We have a very robust discovery engine looking at advances in what we're doing, improving activity, reducing cost of goods, reducing vein-to-vein time, and looking at other applications for our products. We've been able to build out a GMP supply chain. We're working with CDMOs WuXi and Miltenyi to do so on vector and cell product respectively. We have a 35-person team with all functions represented: discovery, translation, clinical development, process development, manufacturing, quality, regulatory, et cetera. We have a great network of advisors that include Carl June Sargill from Penn, but also Hai Levitsky, from former CSO of Juno, and a number of other experts in cell therapy and solid tumors. We have completed our first financing back in 2018, a Series A of $59 million, of which Regina was a member of the syndicate. And it gave us the cash runway into 2021. We're currently in the fundraising mode as well. So we're excited to be here and excited to talk about the cell therapy revolution as a whole and maybe our part in it.
So let me also introduce Reagan Jarvis, who is the scientific founder and CEO at Anocca, a company with proprietary T-cell biology technology platform spanning antigen target discovery and TCR discovery, characterization and optimization. Anocca has a focus on TCR therapy for oncology and is progressing assets to its clinical trials during 2022. Reagan, why don't you introduce a little bit yourself?
Thanks, Alberto. Well, I'm a basic scientist. I'm a biochemist originally, cell signaling technology, and basic cell biology. I'm a New Zealander. I have a strange accent because of that. I've been in Sweden for 7 years and came here specifically to start up Anocca. Anocca is I don't have a slide because I like being on camera apparently, but it's a private biotech company based in Sweden. And it's built around a proprietary T-cell biology platform. And this is quite unique in the fact that it's end-to-end capability in the functional analysis of T-cell biology. And that's spanning target discovery, TCR discovery, but most importantly, TCR characterization, which is actually the bottleneck today in TCR therapies. It's an industrialized cell biology and molecular genetics platform, essentially, which aims to standardize and systemize the very complex cell-based assays you need to actually get readouts from T-cell biology. We're focused on TCR-T and oncology. Our pipeline spans both solid and heme malignancies. We see that challenge as actually a target challenge rather than a delivery challenge at this stage. And that's based on HLA-restricted antigen targets that you can leverage in both cases. We link our platform, our technology, and our assets to a manufacturing capability, which we've built in-house. And critically, we deploy a lot of our cell-based tools and molecular tools to quality control analysis of the manufacturing process, which is particularly important with some emerging regulatory standards. We've raised about 50 million euro to date, which gives us a runway into 2021. We're just kicking off a fundraising round to deploy tools into our recently refitted GMP facility, a manufacturing facility, and set us up for trials into 2022, first in man.
Thank you very much, Reagan. Last and not least, I would like to introduce Miguel Forte, who is the CEO of Boing Therapeutics, involved with ARM and ISCT, and committed to the value of CGT and that can bring to the patients.
Thank you very much again, Alberto, and Alan. It's great to be here. As you said, very committed to cell and gene therapy. An MD PhD by training. I've been in the field for quite a while, as a clinician, as an academic, as a regulator, and recently over the last 10 years in cell and gene therapy. 3 technologies that I've been involved with, and joined Boing Therapeutics early this year, just before we had the challenges of the lockdown, to really take Boing Therapeutics to the next stage. I would say make it a biotech again. It's a company that has been founded in 2005, listed in Euronext, and based in just outside of Brussels, with our own manufacturing and R&D and clinical development. Our portfolio is based primarily on an MSC based approach. You can see there on your right-hand side of the slide the core of what we do, which is take bone marrow MSCs that we then differentiate into a specific target function. And I think Alan mentioned it before. It's crucial to take the advantage of the cells and direct a specific function. But we can take it a level up and gene modify. And in the end, we take cells that can form bone, optimize them by differentiation, and amplify them by gene modification. We have one product that is in clinical development with 2 previous studies that have shown positive data, and we're embarking on a controlled phase 2b study in difficult fractures. We have an opportunistic approach to a biologic that we also developed, taking advantage of our therapeutic area for knee osteoarthritis. We believe that using MSCs targeting bone with specific bone factors that can be secreted through gene modification, we can actually take the cell and gene therapy to the next level in bone. But we're doing other indications, also in inflammation and others. And we recently, to respond to COVID, had a product to preclinical stage with a scientific advice ready to potentially deliver in ARDS. We aim to be a leading company with the MSCs, with the differentiation and gene modification to a specifically target therapeutic approach. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Miguel. It's been a pleasure to have all the participants that have been just introduced on this panel. And I would like really to go into the meat of it. And just to get us warmed up, I would like to dive into how to drive the cell-based revolution. It's a bit of a broad topic, but more specifically, what are the engines for developing these transformational therapies? What are really the starting point, the enabling factor that makes this all possible? And if that's agreeable with you, I would like to start with Stephen, and then maybe we have a round.
Sure. I think that I was thinking about the question and how are we involved and what are we doing in the cell therapy revolution? And it really, from our role as Carisma, it can be seen as 2 ways. One, we're a fairly new and small player in the space. And if you look at like a pie of all the cell therapy work that's ongoing, T-cell obviously takes an enormous component of that. But on the other hand, we are maybe an outsized role in that we're really focused on a cell type that no one else has emphasized in the past. And so we we're focused on the macrophages. So we're not only doing our own research as a small company and growing and going into a space that really needs effort, but we're also, I think it's essential that we continue to collaborate broadly with academic groups that are investing in the area, looking at macrophages, looking at ways to enhance overall activity. We're collaborating with companies that can enhance our activity or have synergistic work and combinations. And the immediate goal, of course, is to broaden the potential applications within oncology and eventually beyond oncology. And I think that collaborative nature in this environment is essential to go forward.
Thank you very much. Miguel, what would be your angle to the question?
Not very different, but one additional point I think that Stephen mentioned, which is the collaboration. As you know, I think we're an emerging field. 10, 20 years ago, someone said we were acute thing. Now we're a clear business opportunity that brings a lot of value to patients. And we should do that together by discussing, collaborating, and actually having associative work, and hence the ARM and ISCT that enables us to, as I said, share the experiences and eventually share the technologies. I think from a point of view of the companies and the product we're doing, the point was made before, and I would stress it. We need to have very targeted products with a therapeutic finality and endpoint, and we should do our research, our work, our clinical development, and above all, anticipate the market access, because I think we'll come back to that in terms of making sure that we collaboratively bring the value to patients. So high science, collaboration, and really work together to bring value to patients.
Thank you so much, Miguel. Maybe Reagan, more or less the same question. So how you and your company involved in this cell-based therapy revolution? How are you making the difference?
Sure. So a lot of the T-cell biology revolution that we work with has been driven by CARs and CAR T therapies. And CARs are essentially antibody targeting fusion receptors. And the target space there is extremely limited. And opening up the native TCR targeting space is really what we're focused on. And really, we founded Anocca because of a deep scientific frustration about systematic tools, the lack of systematic tools to analyze target-specific T-cell responses. And this comes from previous academic work in inflammatory diseases, actually. So our primary focus has been to build robust, systematic cell-based tools based on a range of proprietary technology to allow very precise and efficient target-based analysis of T-cell immunity, right down to the individual patient. And that equips us to discover targets, obviously, whether it's segments of the patient population or individuals. So our cell therapy focus in TCRT is to build an asset portfolio to leverage shared targets in the oncology space, but also in the near future demonstrate an ability to actually deploy this on a fully individualized basis. So our focus is really about opening target space in the T-cell biology or T-cell therapy space, because we think there are a lot of people working on delivery systems, whether it's allogeneic or indeed macrophage delivery, where the real bottleneck from our point of view is available targets and quality receptors to go after them. So that's how we're approaching the problem.
Thank you much, Reagan. Maybe Regina, why don't you bring the investor angle to the same question, and how is your company and yourself involved into this revolution of cell-based therapies?
So we started actually looking at cell-based therapies with hematics really at the early times of using T cells for solid tumors. So we were probably ahead of the curve and maybe a little bit early. And so we certainly have seen the challenges of getting T-cell based therapies into patients, and also what it means if a patient is waiting for his T-cells to be ready and just doesn't make it. So for us, the next generation of investments that we wanted to make was to support that even further and say, how can we speed up getting treatments to the patients? How can we, these people, don't want to be patients, they want to be people. How can we actually make sure that whatever therapy we give to people is actually giving them a life? And so for us, the next generation, next revolution was on having an effective therapy that is also from a convenience standpoint, from a side effect profile, a real revolution. Because we felt that this was needed. We didn't see that, especially in the oncology field, where time was of the matter and where also combination treatments are going to be given, that within the T-cell universe alone, we would find the answer with the general T-cell universe. So we've been really embarking on what other cell types are really involved that could help to achieve that aim. And we've really done a broad screen of the field. And in the end, we ended up with the cells that probably are, in my view, the most neglected ones. And this is how we ended up really with Carisma, saying like, what are the most abundant cells in the tumor microenvironment? It's macrophages. And why are they not doing their job? And so we really want to kind of make sure that things that people have not worked on that much yet, actually getting the appropriate attention. And if we can achieve that via Carisma, that's great. And not all of that may be cell therapy. So this is the beauty of being an investor. So you can also think about, how do I motivate those cells apart from taking them out of the body? And that's, again, I don't know if Steve wants to go there. Cell therapy that's actually applied within the body is something that we've been all doing for a while, by just kind of giving antibodies that bind to the surface of cells and make them do something different, or delivering genetic contents in an in vivo setting, even in humans. So I think for us, cell therapy is a stepping stone to make the lives of patients better and of people better that live with disease. And we will use that, but we will also use any other tool that we can kind of derive from the knowledge that we gain here.
I was just pondering about the comments here. And I think one key aspect, again, is that we have really changed S-curves, development S-curves. And the beginning was really to start with autologous therapies, autologous MSCs. And we're ready now, with the success of products like those released by Novartis, Kymriah, for treating liquid cancer, CD19 programs, really put the emphasis on engineering cells and on using novel types that people have not yet looked at. And macrophage is definitely a really interesting example of how we can tackle a novel cell type and tackle different indications that have been vexing the pharmaceutical industry for many, many years. And solid tumors is definitely something that we can think of addressing correctly this time. Now, this brings another dimension to our discussion: is what about opportunities? What about threats that we have, that we are facing as an industry? I'm thinking in terms of opportunity regarding market access, and this is definitely something that needs to be done very well, because it's going to pave the way for more additional programs, but also for developing new composition of matters. And here I would like to ask Miguel to provide some views of how we strategically position Boing Therapeutics, because it's an interesting example regarding working with MSCs, and people have been working with MSCs for the past 10 years, where products being approved. So how do you reinvent the field to really give a different spin and provide novel patent families for developing novel products that you can partner with a pharmaceutical company? And again, pharmaceutical companies need to be at the heart of all of this. But let's start with you, Miguel, and in your perspective regarding how do you plan, what are threats and opportunities in the field of MSCs and for the field in general?
Well, thank you, Alain. Very much to the point. It's like this. If you go a few years ago, MSCs were cells that we all believed were going to be a panacea. And they were thrown into patients, fingers were crossed, and we were hoping them to work. I think and then obviously we got a bit disappointed. But then the very dynamic lymphocytes came along, and we were able to engineer them, and we got fantastic results. Thanks for the patients. So we got fantastic results, and people saw, yeah, we can take a business out of this, as I said before. I think now we can go back with those technologies, and the opportunity is there because people realize that this can be invested on, and consequently the field has expanded. There's a lot of new technologies. We need to go back and take those cells, which are a bit more like workhorses rather than the stallion that the lymphocytes are, take them back and say, okay, they can be regenerative, but they can also be effective by paracrine perspectives, by secreting factors around them. And so if we take those cells and prime them to a certain function, and we've done that with our leading allogeneic product, we've differentiated it from MSCs into a bone-forming cell. So it's kind of the first step. We can now go back and amplify some of the factors those cells produce and actually make them a super bone-forming cell. And to the point that Regina made before, yes, they do their function, but yes, they are also modified. So there's quite a lot of preclinical development and clinical development and safety concerns that we need to go through, but we're ready for it. And the regulators are also ready for it today because of the experience that they're getting. So it's prime time for targeted cell therapy, which includes, as I said, conditioning, as well as gene modification. But then the next step is, okay, if you've got a product, it needs to address a significant unmet medical need, needs to bring value, and needs to be positioned on what are the opportunities out there and the value that it brings and the willingness to pay to that value. It's important to have a 3D manufacturing. It's important to have a low cost of goods. It's important to justify the value, and consequently be able to actually sell it and engage with modified market access strategies. So scientifically, a lot of opportunity. The field starts to be ready. We still have to do things in terms of shaping the field and the expectations about this. But yes, it's prime time for cell therapy.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel. This is a very good perspective. I spoke about macrophage, so this is, let's go after the I would say one of the newest cell type to get increasing attention. So, Stephen, what are your perspectives regarding threats and opportunities? I think opportunities are quite clear regarding addressing the human tumor microenvironment and leveraging macrophage for solid tumors. But it's still a very, very long journey before achieving a proof of safety, proof of efficacy, as well as proof of relevance of the new product. Stephen.
Yeah, so it's an excellent question. And I think first I'm going to take a lens from the cell therapy space as a whole. And I think that there are, obviously great success with Kymriah and Yescarta approval and CD19 positive B-cell malignancies. But the challenges are in the solid tumor side. And scientific challenges include tumor access, immunosuppressive tumor microenvironment, antigen heterogeneity. And a lot of people, there have been fantastic scientific advances addressing each of those, and whether it's an emergence of dual receptors, and as Reagan said, new targets that make sense, logic gates, the expanding breadth of different cell types, NK, gamma delta T, and macrophages, and we're clearly focused there. And those are all scientific challenges for the field, and then there are many different ways to address those. I think there's another important aspect, and you talked about the long road to eventual approval, and that's really how are you going to integrate into the standard of care? There's been existing combination chemotherapy and antibodies and radiation, et cetera. So how do you integrate a cell therapy approach into that? And the only way to answer that is through data and clinical development. And so you have to look at the right stage of patient. Do you look at combination approaches with cell therapy? So it's really a data-driven aspect. And some of the things that we're thinking about are, as we have single agent activity with our CAR macrophages, what's the best approach? Do we combine with a T-cell checkpoint inhibitor? Do we combine with a CD47 inhibitor? Do we combine with radiation? What makes the most sense for a pivotal design that delivers, which I think is the next important aspect, which is the economic access to these therapies. And so there's like two sides of that. Number one, I think that we have to continue to look at ways to drive down cost of goods, and efficiencies in manufacturing and advances in other areas are going to help there. But on the flip side, we have to demonstrate value, and that value is patient outcomes and survival. And so we have to look at, does it make sense to have our product at an early stage and look at its overall survival aspects, or do we integrate with another approach, and et cetera? So I think that those are the things that we think about, and I think the industry as a whole is thinking about. So scientific advances, the integration into standard of care through clinical development programs, and then economic access.
Thanks. This is very, very insightful. And yes, I think thinking of integrating into standard of care is definitely the right focus, because we need to demonstrate value, and those therapies will be expensive. Obviously, the cost will decrease with the experience curve, but it's absolutely critical to deliver a clinical benefit that no other therapies can deliver, and definitely combining with our other products is part of the answer. Let's go to Reagan. You're working on TCRT and also in oncology. What are your perspectives regarding threats and perspective for the field in general, and also for your particular programs at the moment?
Yeah, well, I think the threats were well summarized by Stephen. I mean, manufacturing complexity is obviously a huge challenge, and the cogs that go with that. So development in that area is needed, and certainly the integration with standard of care is key. And looking at physician uptake and actually the complex diagnostics behind many of these therapies. So equipping the physicians to interpret the diagnostics and have them uptake these in a commercial setting will be actually critical, and especially when you go into the more complex and fully individualized or more personalized therapies. Opportunities for us, and it will be a bit self-serving in terms of target space, because this is really our focus is really unlocking genuine T-cell targets, because that's an essentially unlimited or practically unlimited target space, and although extremely challenging because of their genetic restriction and high segmentation or even individualization. And that I see as a key opportunity in the T-cell space. I think that's clear. It's just a technological hurdle, and that coming back to the threats. Basically, that there are a lot of question marks around the biology in general, to be quite frank. T-cell biology is incompletely understood. We need better tools to look at that in the laboratory, and we need more clinical studies. You need those clinical readouts to actually prove your point. And I take Stephen's point and focus about tumor microenvironment and access essentially as being key to treating solid tumors. But again, I think it really is a question of targets. Do you have the right targeting receptors? Do you have the right targets that you're going after in the first place? And then, from our point of view, we're relatively agnostic about the delivery platform. At the end of the day, we think there are more ways than one to skin that cat. Essentially, NKs, gamma deltas, macrophage, all mentioned, and of course, good old T cells. So, we're of the opinion there's lots of development to go here. We need to address the biology, address better targets, provide better quality receptors.
Excellent, thanks. I think what's absolutely outstanding here is that the type of questions that we're asking ourselves in a panel like this are obviously very different from where we were 10 years ago. 10 years ago, we just wanted to prove a concept. And now this concept is totally proven in terms of the fact that cell and gene therapies are part of the pharmaceutical armamentarium. And we have to improve on them, provide additional benefits, and essentially we have a whole platform technology to build novel therapies. My question here is for our the investor side. So Regina, how do you value a cell and gene therapy company? Are the valuation criteria similar or identical to what you would use for a company developing conventional therapies? Or do you use slightly different filters? And for you, what are the biggest threats to a new company in this field? And what are the advice you could provide to the CEOs and the chief scientific officer of the biotechs?
I think if you go for any cell therapy or even be that at the moment gene therapy options, because at the moment a number of them are developed depending on vectors, it's the cost of production that gets you very early on as a criteria to see whether you can actually get to a value proposition at the end in a product that does make sense. So I think cost of goods and also the ease of production or ease of developing a production method that can also be rolled out on a global level are two factors that come on top of the risks that you usually face with other investments. So these investments are certainly not for the faint-hearted. And as I said, what I like about them, however, is that in most of the cases, you have a very clear view on the biology. So that maybe offsets that a bit. So that's maybe the short answer.
Okay, thanks. So essentially, you have, I would say, you have a very agnostic view about the fact that these companies are developing products in, I would say, at the cutting edge of science. And if it were a small molecule company, you feel more comfortable about the risk because we understand it better as an industry.
Yeah, but on the other hand, you have much more than of let's say, you have certainly safety concerns with small molecules. If you go into very central targets, you have if you don't have a final candidate, you have the uncertainty how long it will take that you actually have a final candidate. So I think that I wouldn't say that a small molecule company necessarily would get priority after over a biological approach. I mean, what's nice about all of those more procedure-based approaches is, of course, that protection is, there's another level of protection that comes with all of the knowledge that you need about it, and also that the need for a pharma company to really acquire a company and own the asset fully, given all the production knowledge that you have, and also probably the access to production capabilities and facilities, is actually, in my view, an extra layer of protection and an extra part of value that you're building. But in the end, I mean, it is something that is relatively close to personalized therapy. So that certainly poses its challenges, and they also need, this risk needs to be priced in.
Okay, thanks. Perhaps we can move on to the next topic.
Yep, I'm happy to. This is very interesting as a conversation, especially because it's driven by a pretty diverse panel. We have 3 different technology. We have MSCs. We have a focus on TCR. We are looking at macrophage. So it's a pretty diverse set of approaches from a clinical and a basic science to how to solve pretty substantial problems that today don't really have a therapeutic answer. And this very diverse set of submodalities in the context of cell and gene technologies in reality underpins the complexity of how this world in reality works. And if we take an angle from the investment side, it gets pretty complex to actually have a fair evaluation of those assets and those approaches, because is anything but a cookie cutter, and everything needs to be looked in a very specific way in the context of the specifics of the company. And this is why it is important to actually have the right frameworks in mind about how to look at investment, or in the case if someone is an entrepreneur, about how to drive an investment with the right risk profile and the right initiative. So definitely this is the question for Regina, but before getting to her, that I would like to ask to her as the last one, as a wrap up, I would like to have the individual thoughts about how an investor should approach investing in cell therapy, and specifically how an investor should think about investing in your specific submodality. Because I really believe that there are nuances that are very different in every specific submodality and technology. So maybe, Miguel, if we start with you, what would be the angle about how an investor should really look at your company? Yes, but it's particularly in your modality and approach to therapeutics.
Thanks again. I mean, obviously, it depends on, if we take first in general, it depends if the company is private, if the company is publicly traded, how you raise cash and how do you address your investor targets. I think the ideal investor is the investor that understands the technology, is able to see the value, understand the challenges, see the opportunity, and then be your partner for the long run. And so if that's what I expect of a good investor, then the investor needs to, as I said, do the due diligence and see the big picture and see where it's going. I was just picking up a recent BMO capital markets assessment. If we take the ones, the companies that are publicly traded, NASDAQ performed a positive about 50%. The best companies performed about 90% growth, while aggregated cell and gene therapy did 11%. So I wonder, again, if we look at that and see some of the investment on earlier stage private companies, which have been quite significant. I mean, here's the market understanding well, and probably a lot of this is retail and trade. Is the market understanding well these technologies or not? That's the big question. If you talk with educated investors like Regina and others, they know how to engage with us. They know what to look for, and they know how to invest and continue to invest and be your support. But publicly traded, maybe slightly different. So that's my dream. That's the data. I'd like to see how Regina comments onto that. I would also say that it has been a roller coaster in terms of investment over the last 12 months, because we cannot detach what we're doing to the macro environment and the impact on the macro environment as well.
Thank you so much. Maybe Stephen, again, from your side, and particularly with an angle of your submodalities, how an investor should look at it.
Right. So I think everyone should keep their eye out for macrophage investment opportunities. Okay.
And if I ask you to elaborate a little bit more, what would you say?
Well done.
Yes. But seriously, I think, first off, we have an immune system, right? And it's composed of a variety of different cells, and each of them has a fundamental role. And if I were an investor, I would probably look at a diversified approach where we look at those as different engineered cell types. And so, there are multiple companies looking at T cells and enhancing the T cell activity. There's the new the emphasis on NK, and we have our cell type. And so I think that diversification is essential for an investor, and the companies need to have a science-based profile or hypothesis of how they're going to work, and a plan on how to execute towards that. I think the other avenue that I think about is the old, the prospector and general store model, where the prospectors, some of them are going to hit it big, some are going to go bust, but the only assured return will be the general store that's supplying the mining equipment. And so that's another avenue for investors. So all of us are going to seek the same basic suppliers and contract resources, and Lonza is one of them, of course, and that could certainly be an investment vehicle for them as well. I think it comes down from an investor's perspective. It comes down to risk tolerance. Do you want to swing for the fences on novel cell types and hope that their plan and execution makes sense, or do you want to have a more conservative role and say that I'm going to be a piece of this or part of this as we go forward? But those are my thoughts as the question was being posed.
Thank you very much. Reagan, maybe your angle, again, I force you maybe to take a spin on your specific technology.
Sure. I mean, I would say I'm the least experienced on the line here, certainly from an investing standpoint. So I would just say it's very, very difficult to value a cell therapy company, especially in the TCR space, with a lot of uncertainties about the biology, about the delivery method, about the COGS, about the risks. RNPV models for individualized therapies are difficult, to say the least, and very difficult to pin down. I would say that you've got to look at, as Stephen said, what's the hypothesis? Have you got a clear mechanism of action, got a clear route for deployment? I'd flip it around a little bit and say, if you're an investor, look for not just a good hypothesis, but a good team. Speaking from my own personal experience, look for some fresh talent. I was just 29 when somebody invested in me, a very brave angel. And when you've got young motivated scientists, the incentives around the development are all business and company focused. There's no long list of academic affiliations and publications that you've got to fill up. And the young scientists coming through now have a really great grasp of the contemporary biology and techniques, but also information sciences and technology at large. So, the complexity of this field is immense. You've got to have a grasp of a lot of different aspects of biology, information science, and business. So, investing in young teams with a strong hypothesis and a strong route to delivery, I think is a way to go.
I love it. A bit of passion. Anyway, Regina, why don't you give us a wrap up about how we actually should look at it as investor? What are the characteristics you're looking for? What's the essence?
Well, what shall I say? The skies look right through us. There's nothing that I can add here. I mean, in the end, it's about the people, it's about the product, it's about the past to actually make some money out of all of that, what we're doing. And on top of that, we have the luxury that we can help patients at the site. No, I mean, it's not that easy. I think, honestly, for me, if I go into something as complicated as cell therapy, I will look Miguel in the eye and see, do you really understand what your cells will be doing there? You talked about the people just putting stem cells into all kind of places in the body. We all remember the big study on the heart function. We all remember anti-scarring. We've all been there. And I need to know that Miguel knows what has happened before and knows what's different now. And with Reagan, I need to know that actually you have a route to differentiate early. I mean, the team is good and you know what you're doing, but you could be onto a journey that could be too long for us. So that's something we needed to look out for. And hey, I'm not going to say anything about praise for Steve anyway. So I'm fully with him. Macrophages are the next big thing. And guys, I really need you leave you with that. And thanks so much to Alberto and to Alain for actually hosting us here. And I'll leave you guys to continue discussing without the investor, which is usually the more exciting part anyway. See you guys.
Thank you, Regina. Bye.
But I would almost ask Alain to wrap us up and make the conclusive notes, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was a great panel, and as usual, 45 minutes is never enough to talk about this field. Just wanted, I was reflecting as well on the previous discussion that we had here at the SACS Forum in the past few years. We talked a lot about the role of pharmas. We talked a lot about market access and demand realization, manufacturing, regulatory evolution throughout the world to accelerate the development of advanced therapies, be it in Japan, be it in Korea, be it in America, be it also in Europe, where we have all of these jurisdictions have adapted the regulatory path. What we have talked about today is back to the fundamentals of, again, the next generation of cell therapies. We need to understand the mechanisms of action better, as Regina reminded us. And basically, if we make a mental map of all the different elements that make this industry and that are important to master, I would say, to succeed, we have to put back, the science is as usual at the heart of it. So that's very exciting because I think in terms of scientific development, we have a better ways to grasp big data. We have artificial intelligence that are going to start to play a major role. And we have already had a few discussions about this. Investments is important, obviously, because it's a fuel of the industry, and the investor community is ready to help as long as we provide, as biotech entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs, solutions that have a possible exit, like any other opportunities. And again, operations is critical, as well as manufacturing, but also excellence in operations throughout the development. Now, I would like to ask a last question to each of the panelists, and also to my co-chair. Next year, in 2021, what do we feel will be the big development that we will see in this industry?
I'll give you while it is something. I think in 1 year's time, I hope we will be doing this face-to-face and in the same room. That is my first wish. And the second wish is that we're closer to this integration in use by the patients, the physicians. I mean, adopting more and understanding more of the use. The integration on the standard practice is essential. So to see more of that with the products are coming to the market.
Thanks. Again, this is very good feedback. Reagan, what do you think would be the key development next year? And again, we didn't talk about COVID-19 and how cell therapies provide as well as an answer, but you have quite a few companies working in this field. But Reagan, what's your view next year? What would be the key milestones that the field in general will have achieved?
Honestly, saying 1 year's time milestones, I think is ambitious for a field as complex as this. I think a lot of it is around developing better tools for not just developing or discovering targets and developing assets to targeting receptors to go against those assets in our field, but better understanding of standard of care or patient management conditioning regimes for conditioning prior to cell therapy treatment, and importantly follow-up and assessment of on-target activity and off-target effects, which is challenging in a space where the biology again is incompletely understood. So I think progress in that direction is needed, and a lot of people are working in that direction. So that's where I see progress being made.
Yeah, thanks a lot. And I don't know if you meant follow-ups, meaning like phase 4 surveillance about patients who receive these therapies.
No, I'm more thinking around off-target effect, on-target effect that are actually measurable on a cell molecular level, which is very challenging in a clinical setting in very heavily conditioned patients.
Brilliant, thank you. Stephen, what do you feel would be the key milestone in the field, not just on macrophage, but really the entire advanced therapies from cell to gene, thinking in terms about novel approvals, thinking about, practitioners being more keen on, even more keen than they are already. So what's your take?
I think that I look back over the last 12 to 24 months, and there's been a tremendous investment in the cell therapy space. And I think that some of those investments are around new technologies and new approaches to various cell therapy. And I think that what I would expect to see in the next 12 months is that translate into clinical outcomes. And so as they're being deployed in various ways, I would hope to see, and I focus on a solid tumor space, but some solid tumor responses and CRs and survival advances in early clinical testing. And I think that Reagan's right. 1 year is a short time frame, but I think that we should start to see some of these advances. And I think eventually that will lead to survival outcomes along the lines of what we're seeing in CD19 CAR-T and heme malignancy. So that's what I'm looking for over the next 12 months or so.
Brilliant. I agree with you. If we could address solid tumors better with cell therapies and gene therapies, that would be a fantastic progress. Likewise, we talked a lot about oncology. We didn't talk about inflammation and autoimmune disease, CNS, but all of these indications, all of these therapy areas will benefit from this revolution. And what is achieved in oncology will translate one day or another into other therapy areas. I think it's time to wrap up. I would like to thank my co-chair. I would like to thank our panelists. I think we had a good discussions. Everybody is available for further discussions with the SACS forum. Please don't hesitate to ask your questions, and we will all be very happy to provide more feedback or simply to discuss further on our perspective. So again, thank you very much. It's very exciting.
Bye.
I hope next year we meet in person.